Why I should never have opened that trunk. The moment I lifted the lid, I knew something inside would change the way I looked at my family forever. I pause there, my hands trembling just a little as I tell you this. You're all looking at me with those wide eyes, the way children do when they sense the weight of a story before it even begins. You think I'm exaggerating, perhaps, or spinning one of my grandmotherly tales to make the past seem more dramatic than it really was. But no, this is different. This is truth. The old trunk sat in the corner of the attic for years, covered in dust, half hidden beneath moth-eaten blankets. Every time I went up there, I saw it. Every time I reached for something stored away, I brushed past it. And every time your father would say to me, "Leave it alone, Ma. It's just junk." But let me tell you something I've learned. When someone insists too strongly that you keep away from something, it's rarely about junk. It's about fear. I remember the first time I asked him about it. He was standing in the kitchen, still young then, in his 40s, the smell of fried onions filling the air as I cooked dinner. "Son," I said, wiping my hands on my apron, "at that trunk in the attic, what's in it?" He didn't even look up from the newspaper. Nothing. "Old things. Not worth your time." "You sure?" I pressed. "I've never seen you open it." His jaw tightened, just for a second. "Ma," I said, "it's junk. Leave it." Now I know your father. I know the way his voice carries when he's hiding something. I raised him, after all. That night, after he went home, I sat in bed thinking about the way his eyes had darted to the floor. For years, I let it go. Out of respect. Out of fear, maybe, that whatever was inside wasn't meant for me. Life has a way of making you push aside your curiosities. There was laundry to fold, bills to pay, funerals to attend. My husband, your grandfather, had already passed, and I spent most of my days in the quiet rhythm of survival. But the trunk waited. Dust grew thicker on it, as though time itself was trying to bury it away. The attic smelled of cedar and age, of summers too hot and winters too cold. Sunlight leaked through the small round window, cutting across the wooden lid like a spotlight, daring me to notice. I didn't open it until last year, the day the storm came. You remember that storm? The one that rattled the windows and sent the power out for half the night. Rain hammered the roof like fists, and the wind howled as though the whole world was grieving. I couldn't sleep, so I climbed the stairs to the attic with a flashlight in hand, telling myself I was only going to check for leaks. The air was heavy, the kind that sticks in your throat. My beam of light landed on the trunk. It sat there stubborn and patient, the brass latch tarnished, the corners frayed with age. My heart began to pound, not from fear of the storm, but from something else. A knowing, a voice inside whispering, and now I kneeled. My knees ached against the wooden floor. The trunk smelled faintly of iron and mildew. My hand hovered over the latch. I thought of your father's voice again, sharp, defensive. "It's just junk." But junk doesn't make a grown man speak like that. Junk doesn't make a son guard secrets from his mother. The latch was stiff, but it gave with a snap that echoed louder than the thunder outside. I hesitated, and then I lifted the lid. What I saw inside didn't make sense at first. There were stacks of letters, bundled with string, photographs with edges curled from damp. A child's drawing, crayon marks faded, and beneath it all, a small wooden box, carved with initials I didn't recognize. I remember whispering into the empty attic, "Oh, my God." The letters smelled of dust and old paper. My hands shook as I untied the first bundle. The handwriting wasn't my son's. It was a woman's, elegant and slanted. Every word pressed deep into the page, as though written with urgency. The first line nearly knocked the breath from me. "I can't live with the silence anymore. You promised me." I sat back on my heels, the storm raging above me, and I read. And the more I read, the colder I felt. These weren't love letters, not in the sweet way you'd expect. These were desperate letters, angry, pleading, heartbroken. They were addressed to my son. I pressed the paper to my chest, the way I used to clutch prayers when life gave me more pain than answers. A mother knows her child, but a mother doesn't expect to discover an entire life he never spoke of. "Why, son?" I whispered into the attic silence. "Why didn't you tell me?" I could almost hear his voice again, stern, shutting me out. "It's just junk." But it wasn't junk. It was a ghost. When the thunder cracked so loud it rattled the trunk itself, I jumped. The flashlight beam swung wildly across the rafters, and for a moment I felt as though the house itself knew what I had uncovered. I pushed the letters aside and reached for the small wooden box. It was heavier than it looked. its carvings rough beneath my fingers. I traced the initials carved into the lid, Yizaryi, and my stomach knotted. I didn't know anyone by those initials. Not in our family, not in his circle of friends. I opened it. Inside was a locket tarnished with age, holding a tiny photograph of a young woman with dark hair and sad eyes. She couldn't have been older than 20, and in that moment, I swear I felt the air shift, as though her memory had been waiting, trapped inside wood and metal, aching to be acknowledged. I shut the box quickly, clutching it to my chest. My mind spun with questions. Who was she? What did she mean to my son? Why had he hidden her away from all of us? The storm raged louder, and I whispered almost like a confession. What did you do, son? I didn't sleep the rest of that night. I sat in the attic, surrounded by papers and photographs, reading by flashlight as rain leaked through the roof. Each letter pulled me deeper into a story I didn't know I was part of. A story my son had buried, hoping I'd never find. And when morning came, when the storm cleared and the house fell quiet, I realized something. I could never look at him the same way again, because inside that trunk wasn't junk. Inside that trunk was the truth he'd spent years trying to keep from me. And children, my dear ones, that was the night I began to unravel the secret your father never wanted me to know. I didn't tell anyone right away. That morning, when the sun finally pierced through the storm clouds, I came down from the attic with swollen eyes and the weight of 100 questions pressing against my chest. I made coffee, though I barely touched it, and when your father called later that day just to check on me, I found myself staring at the phone in silence, wondering if I could even hear his voice without blurting out everything. But I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I put the letters back in the trunk, neat and careful, the way you'd place fragile bones in a grave. Only the little wooden box I kept with me, slipping it into the drawer beside my bed. That locket burned in my mind. The face of that young woman with dark hair and sad eyes haunted me. Her initials, AR, repeated like a drum beat in my head. I kept hearing her voice and the words she had written. You promised me. I can't live with the silence anymore. Don't forget her. Who was her? And what had my son promised? That night, when the house grew still again, I couldn't help myself. I went back to the trunk. I took out one bundle of letters and carried it downstairs. I lit a single lamp by the armchair where your grandfather used to sit, and I read until my eyes burned. The letters spanned years. Some were angry, scrawled fast as though she'd written them through tears. Others were calm, almost pleading, like she was running out of strength. But together they painted a picture of a woman who loved my son, loved him fiercely, and yet he had abandoned her. One letter shook me more than the rest. It said, you can't keep pretending I don't exist. You can't erase me and you can't erase her. I won't let you bury us in silence. If you won't tell them, I will. I stopped breathing for a moment. Her. Again that word. A child, perhaps. I felt a strange chill spread across me, a kind I've only known a few times in life. When a truth is standing right in front of you, but you can't yet name it. The next day, I couldn't keep it inside anymore. I needed to test the ground, see if my son would betray himself with the smallest push. So when he came over in the evening, bringing groceries like he always does on Sundays, I said casually, I was up in the attic yesterday cleaning. He froze for half a heartbeat. I caught a flicker in his eyes, a tightness in his shoulders. Then he forced a smile. You shouldn't strain yourself, Ma. That attic's a mess. I'll clear it one day. I nodded, stirring the pot on the stove, pretending not to notice. I saw that old trunk of yours. Funny, it's heavier than it looked. He set the groceries down a little too hard. Ma, we talked about this. Leave it alone. I turned then, spoon in hand, and looked at him, really looked at him. His face was older now, lined at the corners, but in that moment, I saw the frightened boy he once was, caught in a lie about a broken window or a missing dollar from my purse. Son, I said softly, why don't you want me to open it? His jaw clenched. He busied himself with putting cans into the cupboard. Because it's nothing. It's junk, like I said. Just old papers. Things better left in the past. Whose past? I asked quietly. He froze again, and then he turned, his face set hard. Ma, please, don't. I mean it. I mean it. His voice cracked on that last word, and that told me everything. He left soon after dinner, mumbling about being tired. And as I cleared the dishes, I felt anger bubbling beneath my sadness. He was keeping something from me, something that belonged not just to him, but to all of us. That night, I went back to the letters. My hands shook as I unfolded another one, and there it was, the confirmation I had dreaded and half expected. She has your eyes. Every time I look at her, I see you, but she doesn't know you. She asks where her father is, and what am I supposed to say? Will. That he chose silence? That he chose shame over her? I pressed the paper to my mouth, choking back a cry. My son had a child I never knew about, my grandchild. Dear Lord, I whispered into the empty room. What have you done, son? I thought back over the years, those long stretches when he'd disappear on weekends, the excuses he'd make, the phone calls he'd take outside, his voice low and urgent. I had dismissed them as the habits of a busy man, a private man. But now I wondered, had I missed the signs? Had I been blind to the truth right in front of me? The face in the locket burned in my mind again. Was that her mother? Was that AR? And where were they now? For days, I carried the weight of it alone. I tried to act normal when he called, when he visited, but every word he spoke sounded hollow, every smile rehearsed. I found myself staring at him, searching for guilt in the lines of his face. Finally, one evening, I couldn't bear it anymore. We were sitting in the living room, the TV murmuring in the background. He was telling me about work, about the neighbor's dog that barked all night, small talk that barely touched the surface of anything real. And I cut him off. "Who is she?" I asked. My voice was steady, but inside my chest, my heart thrashed like a caged bird, his brow furrowed. "Who's who?" "Don't do that," I said sharply. "Don't lie to me. I know, son. I know about the letters, about the woman, about the child." Silence, heavy, suffocating. His mouth opened, then shut again. His mouth opened, then shut again. He ran a hand over his face. For the first time in years, he looked like a boy again, caught, ashamed. "Ma," he whispered, "you weren't supposed to find that." "Why?" My voice cracked. "Why would you hide this from me? From your family? From your family? From yourself?" He shook his head, tears brimming in his eyes. "It's complicated." "You know," I said firmly, "it's simple. You loved someone. You had a child. And you buried them as though they never existed." He turned away, staring at the dark screen of the TV. His shoulders shook once, just once, before he steadied himself. "You don't understand." "Oh, then make me understand," I begged. Because right now, all I see is betrayal. Not just to me, but to her. To that little girl who never knew her grandmother. When he finally looked back at me, his eyes were wet, his face raw. "She's gone, Ma." Those words sliced through me. "Gone?" I whispered. "What do you mean, gone?" He didn't answer. He just shook his head, pressing his lips together so tightly they turned white. And in that silence, my heart broke in ways I can't describe. I knew then that whatever truth lay buried in that trunk, it was heavier than I had imagined. It wasn't just about secrets. It was about loss. But I also knew this. I couldn't stop now. I had to keep digging. Because a life, 2 lives perhaps, had been erased from our story, and I couldn't let them stay forgotten. So children, when I tell you that the trunk in the attic is not just wood and brass, believe me. It is a coffin of memories, and once opened, it demands to be faced. And I promise you this, by the time I had read the last letter, I would know everything, whether my son wanted me to or not. I didn't sleep the night your father told me she was gone. The word echoed in my head like a bell, tolling again and again, gone. He had said it so flatly, so finally, as if speaking it out loud might close the door forever. But words don't close doors, they only open more. The next morning, I climbed back up into the attic, determined. My legs ached on the stairs, but my anger carried me higher than my bones wanted to go. The trunk sat waiting, as though it knew I would come. I pulled out every bundle of letters this time, spread them across the floor. The smell of paper, old ink, and mildew filled the air. The storm had passed, but sunlight fell in long golden stripes across the mess, making the letters glow like relics. I read for hours. My eyes burned, my hands cramped, but I couldn't stop. Each page was a piece of a puzzle, and I was desperate to see the full picture. The woman AR name finally appeared in one of the later letters. Anna Rose, I whispered aloud, tasting the name. The letter read, "I begged you not to leave us. I begged you to face your mother, to face your family, but you chose silence. One day she will want to know why her father turned away, and I won't have an answer." I held the letter against my chest, my heart pounding. A child. A daughter. My granddaughter. In another letter, Anna wrote, "She has a laugh that fills the room. She pulls at my hair when she's tired. You should see her, the way she looks at me like I'm her whole world. I wish she could look at you like that too. I had to put the letter down. My hands trembled too much to go on. Tears blurred my sight, and I whispered into the empty attic. I should have known. I should have been there. She should have been here with me. The ache was unbearable. The thought that somewhere out there, once there had been a child with my blood, my family's face, and I had never held her. Never kissed her forehead, never even heard her name. But then, another twist. I found a letter different from the rest. It wasn't just words of pleading or anger. It was a threat. If you don't tell them, I will. I can't carry this alone. She deserves to know her family, even if you're too ashamed to face them. Don't make me bring her to your mother's door without warning, I gasped, my hand flying to my mouth. She had thought of me. She had wanted me to know. All this time there had been someone reaching out in desperation, and I had been left in the dark. But then, silence. The letters ended abruptly after that. No closure, no answers, just a void. Oh. I sat there, surrounded by scraps of a life erased, and I thought of my son's face the night he broke. She's gone, Ma. Gone how? Gone where? I needed to know. That evening, I tried again. I called him, asked him to come over. He hesitated, but finally agreed. When he arrived, I wasted no time. I laid the letters out on the table between us, the locket in the center like a beating heart. His face drained of color. Amal. No. Yes, I said firmly. It's too late. I know her name. I know about the child. And I won't stop until I know the truth. He sank into the chair across from me, burying his face in his hands. For a long moment, he said nothing, just breathed, ragged and uneven. Her name was Anna, he whispered finally. I know, said softly. And the child? I pressed, my throat tight. Your daughter, my granddaughter. His shoulders shook. When he lifted his head, tears streaked his face. Her name was Lily. The name hit me like a stone. Lily. A flower, fragile, beautiful. My granddaughter. I covered my mouth, a sob escaping. Oh God, she was everything, he whispered. But I was young, Ma. I was scared. I couldn't bring her into this house. I couldn't face the disappointment. You raised me to be better, to do things right, and stop, I said sharply. Don't you dare put this on me. Don't you dare say my expectations erased your child. He flinched. I'd never raised my voice at him like that. But my anger boiled too hot to contain. You think I would rather my son live in lies than see my granddaughter's face? You think shame is heavier than love? My hand slammed against the table, rattling the letters. You robbed me of her. You robbed her of me. He broke then. Tears spilled freely, his body shaking with sobs he'd buried for years. She's gone, Ma. She died when she was only 6. The words carved through me like a knife. I stumbled back, clutching the chair for balance. My knees threatened to give out. Give out? No, I whispered. No, he nodded, choking on his grief. There was an accident. A fire in Anna's apartment. They didn't make it out. Both of them. I never told you because I couldn't. I couldn't face you. I couldn't face the truth that I lost them both. The room tilted. My ears rang. I thought of the letters, the locket, the face of that young woman with sad eyes, the image of a little girl I would never see. My heart felt split in two. Why? I whispered hoarsely. Why didn't you tell me then? Why let me find out like this, years later, alone in an attic with ghosts? His voice cracked, barely audible. Because if I said it out loud, it would be real, and I wasn't strong enough. I sank into my chair, tears spilling freely. For a long while, we just cried together, mother and son, drowning in what could never be undone. But in the silence that followed, as the night deepened around us, something hardened in me. A determination. I turned to him, my face streaked with tears, but my voice steady. Then I will remember them. If you can't carry it, I will. If you tried to bury them, I'll dig them up. Anna and Lily will not be forgotten. Not while I breathe. He stared at me broken, but there was a flicker of relief in his eyes, as though some part of him had been waiting years for me to say that. And so, children, that is how the secret came alive in this house again. Through pain. Through grief. Through truth dragged from shadows. But what I didn't know then was that one last letter, buried deep at the bottom of the trunk, would change everything again. Because sometimes the dead don't stay silent. Sometimes they leave behind words sharp enough to cut the living open. And when I found that letter, the darkest truth of all finally came to light. The night after my son confessed about Anna and Lily, I thought sleep might finally come. But it didn't. My body was tired, yet my mind raced like a river in flood. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that locket, those letters, and the name Lily. My granddaughter burned into me like a brand, but something gnawed at me, a gap, a silence between the lines. If they had died in that fire, why had the letters stopped so suddenly before that? Why had there been no final goodbye? No hint of fear, no last desperate scrawl from a woman who clearly wrote through every crisis of her heart. By dawn, I knew what I had to do. I went back to the attic, the air cold and dry, the floorboards creaking under my steps. I dragged the trunk into the sunlight this time, refusing to sit in the half-dark with it anymore. I emptied everything. Letters, photos, scraps, scattered across the floor like bones spilled from a coffin. And there it was, at the very bottom, pressed flat against the wood, stuck beneath the lining as though it had tried to slip away from time itself. An envelope. My hands shook as I pulled it free. It was yellowed, edges brittle, but the ink was darker, fresher than the others. The handwriting was frantic, the pen pressing through the paper. I opened it carefully, almost reverently. And as I read, my world cracked open again. If anything happens to me, it won't be an accident. You know what you're capable of. You say you love me, but you love your secrets more. If I disappear, if Lily disappears, someone must know the truth. And if your mother ever finds this, I beg her, please don't let him bury us. I froze. My breath caught in my throat. She hadn't written it to him. She had written it to him. She had written it to me. The room tilted. My son's face flashed in my mind. The tears, the guilt, the way he said they died in a fire, as if the words themselves were smoke choking him. And dear God, I whispered, what did you do, son? My knees gave way and I sat on the floor surrounded by the pieces of his hidden life. My hands clutched the letter so tightly it wrinkled under my grip. My body trembled, but inside something else burned. A terrible, gnawing suspicion. That night I didn't call him, I didn't ask. I couldn't, not yet. I couldn't not. Instead, I carried the letter to bed, tucked under my pillow like a blade I was too afraid to draw. When he came by 2 days later, I knew I couldn't keep it in. We sat across from each other in the kitchen, steam curling from our mugs of tea. He looked worn, as if confessing had aged him years. His hands wouldn't stay still, tapping, shifting, ringing together. "See, son," I said quietly, "I found another letter." His eyes darted to me. His breath caught. I laid it on the table between us. He didn't reach for it. He didn't even glance down. His gaze locked on mine, wide, raw, and suddenly terrified. "I never touched them," he blurted. His voice shook. "Amma, I swear, I never hurt them. I wasn't there that night. I should have been. Maybe I could have saved them, but I wasn't there." Then why does she write like this? My voice cracked, tears rising unbidden. I slammed my hand down on the letter. Why would a woman put her last hope in me, warning me of you, if she didn't fear you? He broke. His chest heaved, his face twisted in anguish. Because I failed her, Ma. Because I made promises I didn't keep. I told her I'd leave my job, leave everything, build a life with her and Lily, and I didn't. I kept hiding them. I let her live alone, struggling, afraid, while I sat here pretending nothing existed. Of course she feared me, not because I'd hurt them, but because I abandoned them. I abandoned them until she believed anything was possible. I searched his face, desperate, terrified. In the fire, he dropped his head into his hands. It was real. It was an accident. But when I got the call, I couldn't even bring myself to show up to the funeral. I was a coward. I thought if I buried the evidence, if I locked it away, I could erase the shame. But Ma, his voice cracked. I never laid a hand on them. My sin wasn't murder. My sin was silence. I sat there, my whole body trembling, my heart torn between rage and mercy. "You robbed me," I whispered. Not of safety, but of love. "You robbed me of knowing them while they lived." His tears spilled freely, his voice barely audible. "I know, and I live with it every day." Silence stretched between us, the kind of silence that weighs like stone. I wanted to scream, to shake him, to demand he take back the years he'd stolen from me. But time doesn't run backward. Finally, I reached across the table, my old wrinkled hand covering his trembling one. "You will never bury them again," I said. My voice was steel through the tears. "Anna and Lily live here now, in this house, in our stories, in our memories. They are ours, even if too late." He nodded, sobbing openly, clinging to my hand as though it were the only rope keeping him from drowning. And that night, after he left, I sat in the quiet with the letters and the locket spread around me. I whispered their names aloud, again and again, as if calling them home. Anna, Lily, Anna, and I felt something. Maybe it was only the wind stirring the curtains. Maybe it was only my tired heart. But I swear it felt like presence, like two souls finally allowed to step into the room. So, children, when you ask me why I tell you this story, why I open wounds older than you are, here is my answer. Because secrets rot in silence. Because shame builds walls so high we forget the people left outside. Because love, unspoken, can turn into ghosts that haunt us long after the fire burns out. And I will not leave you with ghosts. I want you to know that you had another grandmother once, a woman named Anna with sad eyes and fierce love. And you had a cousin, a little girl named Lily, who laughed like sunlight and pulled at her mother's hair when she was tired. You may never meet them, but you can carry them in your stories, in your blood. Remember this, my dear ones. Families are built not just by who lives, but by who we choose to remember. And as long as I breathe, Anna and Lily will not be forgotten.